FNAF's biggest mystery in the modern era is understanding what is even going on in the future of the franchise, with many new characters that have been introduced ever since 2019 with the release of Help Wanted. However, two huge topics that have been brought up is if Vanessa is related to the Afton family and when Security Breach takes place in the timeline. Well, today, I set out to find those answers by tackling one question to help solve the other. And I think I have a very solid answer to both of these questions for if Vanessa is an Afton and when Security Breach takes place in the FNAF timeline. So join me as we decipher this 4-year question once and for all. Hello everyone, my name is Noah Raven and welcome to the Xander Zone. In today's episode, we'll be covering Security Breach's place in the overall FNAF timeline, Vanessa's age in the modern era, and how that leads us to believe that Vanessa is an Afton in the game's timeline. I am joined today by fellow theorist and FNAF AR connoisseur _ who helped out immensely with this theory, who will be covering what we found in AR for us. So as always, if you enjoyed, make sure to hit that like subscribe button as we have a goal of 7,000 subscribers by the end of the year. While you're at it, go show some love and support to _ as you'll be able to find his channel everywhere in this video. Share this video with your friends and family as every bit helps, and otherwise, without further ado, let's get right into the video. So we of course have to start out with FNAF Help Wanted, as this was the first game of the modern era releasing on May 28th, 2019, and the game that actually introduced us to Vanessa through Vanny. So let's start with Vanessa's first actual appearance in this game, Curse of Dreadbear. In this DLC, there's one minigame that is Vanny's only appearance in this DLC, being Corn Maze, a minigame in which you, the player, have to navigate a corn maze while evading Grim Foxy and by finding one of 4 keys to escape using their corresponding colored gate. However, if you decide to give yourself a challenge and collect all 4 keys, a 5th glitchy purple key will appear on the map. Once obtained, you can go back to the spawn area to open the cellar and find Vanny's mask, which is later used for a secret in the main lobby, detailing how Vanny is excited about making her new costume. Now, this minigame is really interesting to me, and here's why. In Corn Maze, we have to look at who appears and where in this minigame. Odds are you'll first come across Grim Foxy, a foxy that's on fire in a maze. Now, to me, this raises a few alarm bells, as there's only one time in FNAF where someone associated with Foxy is on fire in a maze, being FFPS, with Michael being in the building when it burned down. We continue this connection with Michael further with Grim Foxy's appearance in the death screen of Curse of Dreadbear. In this death screen, Grim Foxy can be seen outside of the graveyard trying to claw his way back in, meaning that whoever Grim Foxy is a representation of is alive, while Dreadbear and 8 others are in the graveyard surrounding the purple gravestone, which to me places this death screen after FFPS in representation due to William dying in FFPS and Dreadbear guarding his grave, like how the vengeful spirit guards William in UCN to torment him in his mind, which is a great bridge into our next character who appears in the Corn Maze minigame, being Glitch Trap. We can help conclude this as typically anything purple and glitchy is Glitch Trap related, and well, that's exactly what this 5th key is. Purple and glitchy. With that information and the fact that Glitch Trap is an AI mimicking William's actions in the 1985 missing children's incident, that helps us place 2 absent family members above ground, being William and Michael, as their AI representation forms. This is what helps us get to our first clue into what's going on with Vanessa and her family heritage. In this minigame, after getting the 5th key, you could go back and unlock that cellar with Vanny's mask in it. Now, in Security Breach, it is mentioned that in the tapes that Vanessa does not like dark areas.
Do you have a hobby? No? Perhaps we could find one for you, like a sport. No? I have a craft space in my basement. Maybe I could come up with something you could learn to do.
I don't like dark basements.
This shows us that step in her life of being locked underground in a dark area that ends up causing her dislike of dark areas, which reflects in Corn Maze where her AI form is in a dark cellar underground, where the key to unlocking it is Glitch Trap's purple key, helping us piece together that Vanessa was locked in a dark basement by William Afton, and this is her release taking place, a continuation of the ending from the base Help Wanted game, in which Glitch Trap traps the player, who we can conclude is Vanessa, in a dark basement. So to explain this quickly, we have 3 AI representations of different characters, 2 of which are Afton family members, along with the third one being Vanessa that ends up reflecting her childhood story and Security Breach that starts to piece this puzzle together. However, we could use this information and more in AR to continue to piece this puzzle together, which I'll be passing to Underscore to help to explain this theory.
So, fellow theorists, now that we've got some of these connections down, we can start to fully form this theory with FNAF AR, specifically through the game's various emails and the lore they dropped. First off is Vanessa's age, which we received via an email that sadly never actually appeared in the game. In this email, outlining the birthdays of Fazbear employees and their preferred cakes, we get to learn a few pretty important things about Vanessa. Firstly, that as of FNAF AR, Vanessa is either 23 years old or going on 23 in September of 2020, the year also given to us in many of the emails. Now, this is something we can use, mainly for potentially determining when Vanessa was actually born. If we take the date this email was supposed to have been sent in AR, being December 15th, 2019, and subtract her likely current age of 22, then we get 1997, a year that's actually already given to us in the form of Vanessa's email address, being Nessie97, aka 1997. So, with those numbers lining up surprisingly well, we can conclude that Vanessa would have been born in September 1997. And with the theory of Vanessa being an actual Afton, Follow Me and the death of William wouldn't be able to happen until after September of 97. That is, unless you think Vanessa's actually Michael's daughter, though that we're not even really going to dive into here. Returning to the emails, the next thing of note is how Vanessa likes her birthday cake, being bunny-shaped. This is pretty obviously due to Glitchtrap's control and her new Vanny persona following FNAF VR, which we can confirm due to some of the emails that actually released in AR raising some pretty big red flags that she's not entirely herself at the moment. While all that was sort of given as of the time of VR, what wasn't at the time is our final detail of Vanessa's last initial being A. Of course, we can't 100% confirm this last initial stands for Afton, but with the very few last names were given in the FNAF series, and the fact of just how much this initial is pushed in the game, even being used by Vanessa herself later on, it's most certainly an important detail to note considering by now that we know Vanessa is an actual Afton in the movie universe. So considering FNAF AR was the first time we actually got to know a bit about her in the games, let's take a bit of a deeper look at what it initially did for her and her character. In the games, Vanessa is made out to be a pretty strange character in the offices of Fazbear Entertainment, seemingly having two personalities according to IT guy Luis Cabrera, calling out how she sometimes looks up things about nature and even dresses in colorful attire along with her rainbow extensions, however also likes looking up some pretty brutal things about the human body the average person probably shouldn't be googling. The strangest of these searches is undoubtedly how to induce compliance in human subjects and how to induce self-compliance. Now, manipulation is of course an iconic trait of the Afton family throughout the franchise, such as with Circus Baby manipulating Michael into the scooping room, Michael manipulating Fazbear Entertainment using fake aliases, and William who manipulates too many to count across the series, with one of them mainly being Vanessa herself in the movie universe. Now, you can chalk this all up to Glitchtrap's influence over Vanessa, and while this is largely true for the games, it also paints a nice parallel to the plot of the movies themselves. In the FNAF movie, Vanessa is manipulated by fear to do exactly what her father, William, wants her to do, which in this case is to keep tabs on and manipulate the pizzeria's security guards, potentially dispatching some of the guards themselves if they were to get too close to the truth, while hiding the bodies of anyone in the pizzeria who suffers a far less fortunate fate. Meanwhile in the games, Vanessa is being manipulated by Glitchtrap out of fear to keep him and anything else he's up to a secret, dispatching anyone who gets too close to the truth, which may even include a hand in Security Breach's missing therapists. All in all, this manipulation seems to be a pretty big hint that what we expect that A and her last name to stand for is indeed the correct answer. However, that conclusion can actually help us to understand a bit more about what else actually goes on in FNAF AR. In FNAF AR, the contractor company in charge of the Fazbear Funtime service begins to have issues after scanning some vintage circuit boards, accidentally releasing a virus into their system. Eventually, after contacting Fazbear Entertainment on December 14th, 2019, an IT account named V_A reaches back out to access their systems. After successfully isolating the virus itself, from December 20th to 25th of 2019, every contractor employee begins getting locked out of all their accounts as someone is hacking their system, mainly sending commands to disable safety features on all Fazbear Funtime service animatronics. Later, it's clear from Lewis's sleuthing that he may suspect Vanessa as obviously the culprit behind the VA account. Though that's not where her tampering ended. It would seem that she'd later also be involved in sending _Pizzaplex, aka a virus-flagged email to all Fazbear staff, with Vanessa as the VA account being the very one to allow it through despite its detection, as we can see from that very email's own September security incident log. In both of these cases, we're seeing a very hostile takeover of a company, both in the infiltration of the Funtime Services contractor company and virus spreading through Fazbear Entertainment, very much like what we've seen from William in the past, completely taking over MCM and absorbing who knows what other companies into the Fazbear conglomerate. All of this begins to create some pretty obvious connections between Vanessa and the Afton family, both in terms of how she acts and how she's represented in the FNAF movie, perfectly paralleling the story of Vanessa in the games to an extent we may not even fully understand yet. However, with Vanessa transferring to a security gig at the Pizzaplex following the events of AR, where we begin to actually get a glimpse into Vanessa's life and childhood is none other than Security Breach, back with Narrow Raven.
Now we get into Security Breach. However, before we do, I want to give a disclaimer that there will be topics discussed here that may be uncomfortable to certain viewers from the CDs in the game. So if you're not comfortable, don't worry. Before I talk about it, I will have text appear on screen with a timestamp for you to skip to. So let's get to the CDs, shall we? So we first have to talk about Vanessa's father, Bill. Now, we know that Bill would also have the last name of A, and many theorists and myself view this as a cover-up name that William uses in the game's universe. Something he does in the Silver Eyes trilogy with the name being Dave, and the movies with the name being Steve Raglan. However, we never did get a hint as to what William's fake name was in the games. And with Bill being so close to Will, it starts a conversation on who Bill really is. And we do get some information on this Bill character that sounds awfully a lot like William. Bill is a horrible father and has manipulated Vanessa in many ways to the point in which she actively fears her father, even many years later, fearing that he is watching her at all times, even to the point in which when Bill is brought up, Vanessa goes nearly silent, whispering to herself and then says that he's always watching. Now, we know this isn't Glitchtrap talking, as at this point in the story, it seems Vanessa is in control of her own thoughts and listens to Glitchtrap at times to know what she should do, reluctantly following Glitchtrap throughout the process. However, Vanessa only talks to herself here, which you could say is her talking to Glitchtrap, but we have no clue for sure, so it's sadly up to speculation there. Now I'm going to bring up the part that some of you may be uncomfortable with. I will censor it, but if you don't want the story to be implied, please go to this time on screen to avoid it if you don't want to hear it, as it isn't super important to this theory. We know Bill's manipulation went really far, as when there was a custody battle between him and Vanessa's mother over custody, Bill manipulated Vanessa into lying in court, and after court, Vanessa's mother committed. Now, I'll pass on talking about this any further. However, the point is that Bill is very manipulative, and who knows what he did to make Vanessa agree to lying in court. However, we can continue with our Bill and William connections with proving that this whole story is true from Vanessa. In these tapes, you can also hear Gregory and his therapy sessions, in which at the end, it's found out that Gregory's story is false, as if he's telling someone else's story. Which if you'd like to know more about Gregory's CDs, you should check out this video from T-Dreads. However, Vanessa never really tells her story. However, the therapist has the court documentations and everything else on file in these CDs, meaning that everything said about Bill here is the truth, meaning these connections with Vanessa hating dark basements and dark areas, Bill being manipulative and a horrible father and husband, having a very similar name to William with the name Bill A, and William being known for having fake names throughout the franchise. This then helps us connect not only what happened to Mrs. Afton, but also that Bill A is none other than William Afton, father to Vanessa A, who ended up locking her in a dark basement and manipulated her to do his bidding, something we see with the manipulation in the movies and now in her future life working as a security guard under the AI version of William and still being scared of her father to this day, something that Vanessa is doing in the second FNAF movie. With all this information combined that Vanessa is an Afton and her age, we can start to piece together when Security Breach takes place in the timeline of FNAF. Now, Security Breach's place in the timeline is really hard to start to get a grasp on. However, we can start to get that going with the whole entire daycare area in Security Breach. So let's go from the entrance and make our way around, shall we? So the first thing we have to note is this whiteboard that's just to the right of the room when you first enter the daycare. On this whiteboard, we actually get a lot of information that's going to help us out here with figuring out the time frame of when Security Breach takes place. So let's decipher these lines of text by figuring out what they even mean. So going from left to right, the first thing to note is how many guests are attending and which animatronic is attending this party. We can decipher that FR is Freddy, MY is Monty, RX is Roxy, and CH is Chica. The next would be the party package and the number that corresponds to it. This won't be too important to us here. Next is the date the party is taking place, and lastly what the event is for, which we can decipher. BD is for a birthday, GNNA for general or non-applicable, grad for graduation, and BADM for a bar mitzvah. Now, I'll explain the last one really fast as this only appears for one room, even though it isn't important to our theory. If we make our way over to party rooms 8 and 9, we find a whiteboard detailing the party, and there's a phrase on this one. And sorry if I butcher this, anyone. That says, El Chaim, which is a Jewish saying meaning to life, and is sometimes said when there's a toast. So we can assume this would be a bar mitzvah due to its relation to the Jewish faith and culture. So let's head back and read a line of this for you all. So for example, on this room, we have 50 guests being visited by Chica, which they requested for party package 5, with the event taking place on the 15th for a bar mitzvah. This will be very important for the rooms we will be looking at here, being the birthday related rooms, being room 1, 4, 6, 7, and 11. So let's take a look into our first party room, being party room 1. Well, there isn't much to note. However, the start of a pattern here begins. In this room, a table full of purple party hats. And if we go into rooms 2 through 5, they all also have purple party hats only, whereas 6 through 11 have multicolored hats. So this already screams William Afton to me. However, at the moment, it's only just a cool reference and nothing more, right? Well, in the other birthday party rooms, 6, 7, and 11, there isn't really much there of importance to us. However, room 4 is where the date starts to really fall into place. On this whiteboard of this room, we can decipher that this is for 4 guests being visited by Monty, with party package 1 taking place on the 9th of March for someone's 40th birthday, 4 chairs, no tableware, 4 hats, with a special request for balloons that say Yay 40. However, there's another interesting thing written on this whiteboard that's being covered up by this sheet of paper that details how only the Freddy and Friends birthday song can be sung. This appears on 3 of the 5 birthday party rooms. However, behind this sheet of paper, we can read, "Don't let guest back," in the letter D, keeping it a secret from us what was meant to be here. However, I think we can get a good idea on what this word is once we take a look inside of this room. The first thing you'll see in this room is a singular lone table with 5 chairs, with 3 of them being occupied by Freddy, Roxy, and Chica, with 2 chairs empty, and the head of the table with a single slice of cake. Now, this is clearly Happiest Day coded, which is really odd to me as this would mean 40 years after Happiest Day, essentially the 40th birthday of Happiest Day, right? Well, I don't think so, as there's more clues in this room that lead us to believe it's actually a different event. In this room, we can find newspapers laying on the floor that are all torn up. Now, sadly, we can't read these as they're just black bars. However, this tells that this is a documented event that took place at some point. With our MCI imagery and the references to 5 everywhere, even back at the first whiteboard that has 4 moons and 1 sun to reference 5 yet again, with Happiest Day, I think we can say that the documented event this is referencing is the missing children's incident from 1985. So we can take 40 years and add that to 1985 to get 2025. Which is really good as this means it takes place 2 years after FFPS. However, we're still missing that day. Well, luckily all of these party rooms combined help us find the date this game takes place in 2025. If you go into each party room, you'll find no food, no open presents, and no sign of any guests. However, what you will find in the Yay 40 room is a cake, an open present that has Monty in it, and a slice of cake on the table, the only room where the party was already celebrated. So if we take a look at this room's whiteboard, we can find that this party took place on March 9th, meaning that the game starts at 11 p.m. on March 9th and goes on to March 10th, the Monday of the week for Security Breach, giving us a date for Security Breach being 11 p.m. on March 9th to 6 a.m. on March 10th, 2025, solidifying the date for this game after 4 years of searching. However, we can tell you more about this game with Gregory's story from before the events of the game on a website no one thought would be used for FNAF lore. Now we have to talk about something that almost no one talks about, which is 3 Game Jolt pages made by Steel Wolf 4 years ago. Now, Glamrock Freddy's has nothing of importance to note. However, Vanessa and Gregory's do. First, we have to visit Vanessa's, as hers is the quickest to explain here. So earlier we mentioned how Vanessa's last name could be A, but it's hard to tell as they all come from unused emails in FNAF AR. Well, luckily for us, Vanessa's Game Jolt page helps solve this issue. If you go and visit this page, you'll instantly notice that Vanessa does have a last initial, the same one from AR being A. This helps us solidify that Vanessa's last name does canonly start with the letter A. However, that's not our bombshell for this theory. Rather, Gregory's account helps us give a timeline for this game. So on this account, Gregory details his travels in the Mega Pizzaplex for 31 entries that gives us a timeline of not just after Freddy's meltdown on stage, but also before this as well. Now, I won't be covering all 31 here, so I'll put the link to this account in the description so you can all give it a read yourself. However, the first log on December 4th, 2023 details Gregory's first ever visit to the Pizzaplex after hours, saying that he's starting to learn the layout of the Pizzaplex and how when he goes through parts it can be eerie and creepy, and that sometimes the cameras are his best friend when watching out for things in the dark. Now we fast forward a little bit to something Gregory says about his New Year's resolution on December 18th, 2023 for 2024. This being the more major thing, being to figure out what's going on in the Pizzaplex and live to see 2024. Now this luckily gives us a time frame of when the Pizzaplex was at least open during December of 2023 going into 2024. Now another thing I want to bring up is in entry log number 20, which is posted on December 24th. Gregory brings up a mention of a human-like staff bot that's medically related. Now, me and fellow theorists saw this and instantly thought the same thing: Dolly. However, the strange thing is that in all of Security Breach, there is no medically related staff bot anywhere. However, by using this, we can actually find Nurse Dolly's hospital in Security Breach. When thinking of a medical bay, the first place I looked was where Freddy takes us in the beginning of the game. However, I was wrong. There's no signs of Nurse Dolly or her hospital here. So I decided to look where Nurse Dolly would be repairing animatronics, and it led me to under the show stage where I believe to be Dolly's hospital. After looking at Dolly's hospital in Secret of the Mimic, I noted this wall pattern and decided to use it to see if I could cross connect it to anything. And sure enough, it appears in this room, fit with conveyor belts, animatronic endos to work on, and a singular chair in the center reminiscent of Captain Springlock from Secret of the Mimic, with an area nearby full of animatronic endos ready to learn and be worked on by Nurse Dolly. So I believe that where Gregory came across his human-like nurse staff bot was in this room where you repair Freddy throughout the game, and also five endos in a cage that in Morse code spell out AI. So let me know what you all think of that. But to get back on track, in the next log, Gregory meets Glamrock Freddy on Christmas Day, calling it a miracle that Freddy isn't hostile. Now we know this isn't what happens in the game, as there's a few key details here that are given to us a few logs later. In log 26 on December 29th, Glamrock Freddy tells Gregory to hide in his chest compartment, where Gregory refuses to do so. However, in log number 27 on December 30th, Gregory gets cornered and can only escape to the animatronic-infested daycare, in which he then accepts this offer. Now we could use this to confirm this isn't what happens in Security Breach, but what happens before it. In Security Breach, Gregory starts at Glamrock Freddy's chest, and Glamrock Freddy is worried that there's a person in there and not a cake or present. As well, this event from the log taking place is across the whole Pizzaplex in location. Then in log number 29 on January 1st, Gregory gets worried about Freddy's power and then goes missing for 4 days from January 1st to January 4th to come back and find 2 battery upgrades for Freddy in log number 30. After Gregory disappears, then comes back on June 14th, 2024, talking about how the friendly faces he met there were actually not so friendly after all, with the final log being that he's thinking of upgrading Freddy to solar power. This continues to help us further decipher that this isn't Security Breach either, as Freddy in the main game is not ran on solar power, but just recharge stations. However, after this, Gregory goes radio silent and hasn't posted since. This is presumably when Gregory gets taken over by Glitchtrap, and 8 months later is when he breaks free and the events of Security Breach takes place. This helps us explain why Gregory knew to hide inside of Glamrock Freddy, as that was the only animatronic that was friendly to him 8 months prior, and why Glamrock Freddy recognizes Gregory's name, but can't pinpoint as to where he met him, as since he started in safe mode, some of his memories are clouded still. This then giving our story of Gregory from December 4th, 2023 to March of 2025. A timeline of 15 months in between Gregory first starting to investigate the Pizzaplex and when the events of Security Breach take place.
Hey everyone, it's real life me. First time I'm ever doing something like this, and really quick, if you do kind of like this style, let me know. If you're wondering why I'm doing this, I got lazy and I didn't want to do any more voiceovers with a bunch of PNG tuber editing and all that stuff, so you're getting this for now. I even got the FNAF 2 movie poster for this. And ignore these presents. Those are for One More Night of Christmas. we're supporting Fee in America. If you want to come hang out, December 19th to the 21st, I'll be live doing that. And you have a chance of winning something from this pile. Minus this Adventure Time cookbook. I got that from my girlfriend for Christmas. Anyways, I'm here to talk about the FNAF 2 movie, and I have the script in my hand right now because I notoriously suck at remembering scripts. So yeah, let's get into it. So the FNAF 2 movie is really interesting with a lot of things that comes to Vanessa's whole entire life factor into being an Afton. So a lot of this movie is about Vanessa moving along and trying to get over her fears of William. So one thing that she does is that she takes 4 items out of a box. And now I know for a fact one of these is Garrett's plane and 3 others, which I know marbles is one of them, then there's a book and I think a mirror? I don't know, it's kind of hard to tell in the movie. I'm gonna rewatch the movie when I get the chance, but yeah. There's those 4 items and essentially she uses those and white noise to fall asleep and essentially confront her father in her head. So she does this and she decides to run away because it was kind of weird how she ran away. I mean, she instantly went from I'm not scared of you to running, but whatever. So as she runs away, she turns into Kid Vanessa, really short little Kid Vanessa. And she decides to go behind like a curtain or something. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but she comes across Circus Baby. Now, Circus Baby is really important to this, as Circus Baby obviously is, well, Elizabeth Afton in the games, which is William Afton's daughter. Now, one thing that a lot of people have brought up is that Vanessa may or may not be some sort of representation of Elizabeth or recreation. It's weird. So I'm here to tell you that that's wrong because of this. So one thing that goes on with Circus Baby is her eye color. Her eye color tells us if she's possessed or not. Blue being that she isn't, and green that she is. So what's Circus Baby's eye color in the movie? Well, in the movie, it's really hard to tell, as you can see right over here somewhere. Her eye might be green, it might be blue, it's hard to tell, but there's actually something that helps us out here. Now, this being a post from one of the actresses, sitting right in front of Circus Baby. Now, as you can see here, her eye color is green. So it's really weird because in the movie, her eye color does glow blue when the lights turn on. Now, I think that's just the animatronic, but the green part is what's more important here, as green obviously means she's possessed already, but not by Vanessa. Vanessa's alive. So that means that Elizabeth and Vanessa are 2 different characters. So regardless, we can't really say that, oh, well, Vanessa can't be an Afton because of whatever reason you might have with Elizabeth. Maybe she's just a recreation or like some kidnapped kid, which might be Garrett or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, so there's that. And then obviously there's also Michael Afton in this movie, who isn't Mike Schmidt. So Michael Afton does come across Vanessa. I think towards the end of the movie is like the first time they ever meet. And when they do first meet, the coolest thing ever is that the first thing Michael says to her is, "Hey sis." That's it. Hey sis, goes on a monologue, gets clotheslined by Jeremiah, and yeah, that's his whole entire deal. Well, not his whole entire deal, but you know what I mean. And well, that's kind of all I really got. Vanessa really is just an Afton, and it really does help us get to Security Breach's place in the timeline. There's more that I do want to bring up that I will pretty quick here. So one thing I really wanted to bring up from the movie is UCN. You know, that's my favorite thing. And well, UCN is really interesting in this movie. It takes place for possibly 2 years is what it's hinted at. Now, the reason why 2 years is interesting to me is that so far we've played Security Breach in 2025, and I believe FFPS might be in 2023. So the reason for this is that in that game, there's an audio file called HRY223 and the insanity ending. In this insanity ending, well, you're learning things you shouldn't. And well, HRY223, people speculate, myself included, that it's Henry 2023. So if we have UCN taking place for 2 years, we take that from the movie, put into the games, that lines up perfectly between the time frame of FFPS to Security Breach. 2 years between those games. AR in 2019, meaning that odds are Fazbear Entertainment didn't have pizzeria locations, but they did have ideas for video games or Fazbear Funtime service, stuff like that, my interpretation. But who knows, maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, I do want to get back into just like the normal stuff now, so bye guys.
Alright, so what should you take away from this theory? Well, we made points that help us point to the timeline of Gregory's story, starting on December 4th, 2023, and Security Breach starting on March 9th, 2025. Next is Vanessa's story starting in 2019. placing Help Wanted in AR in the 2019 to 2020 timeframe. The next thing to take away is that Vanessa is most certainly an Afton in the game's universe, with Bill being William Afton's cover-up name, resulting in William locking Vanessa in his basement. Next is that odds are the parts and service area in Security Breach is Dolly's hospital from Secret of the Mimic, just renovated for modern purposes. Now, before you go, I want to shout out a few amazing people who helped make this theory come to fruition. First, I want to shout out is, of course, Underscore, for not only listening to my ramblings, but also helping me piece them together and letting me use his website contain all the FNAF AR emails that I will have linked in the description. Next, I want to thank Fazbear Entertainment Corporation for also listening to my ramblings and helping me investigate the Yay 40 room. And the same thing goes to Terminal Error, who did the same thing, and even helped provide some of the images you saw in today's video. The next shoutout goes to Windy Spring System, who made the pixel art for Bill in this video. Lastly, to Exploding Loaf, who helped with the hands for the thumbnail you all are seeing for this video. Thank you 5 so much for all the help, and if you, the viewer, can go show them all some love and support, that'd mean the world to me. Now I'm going to hold you for one more moment to ask you all to join on stream for the 19th to the 21st to join me and many other creators for one more night of Christmas supporting Feeding America. We're gonna have a lot of giveaways and cool fan game reveals and more for you all. So even if you can't donate, just being there means the world to us. Now, as always, if you enjoyed, hit that like and subscribe button so we reach our goal of 7,000 subscribers by the end of the year. Share this video with your friends and families, every bit helps. Comment down below your thoughts. Just remember to keep it kind, calm, respectful, and that's just a theory. Now, I hope you all have a great day, stay safe, and Merry Christmas.